What's going on, guys? It's Fight Season MMA, and today I want to make a video talking about why I believe Dricus Du Plessis could become the UFC's most valuable asset and biggest star in the sport. Dricus Du Plessis just defended his title against Israel Adesanya at UFC 305 and won the title off Sean Strickland at UFC 297, and Dricus Du Plessis is becoming one of the biggest stars in the sport itself. But I want to talk about today of why I believe Dricus Du Plessis could become the sport's biggest star and of how he could become the UFC's most valued asset. If you guys enjoy watching the UFC content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. That is the best way to help the channel grow. While you're down there, please turn on the post notifications just so you guys are updated daily of my UFC content that does drop daily, and just so you guys are always staying updated with the most recent UFC news and content. But with no further ado, let's jump into the video on why I believe Dricus Du Plessis has the ability to become the UFC's biggest asset in the organization right now, and of how he possesses all the characteristics and traits to become a massive UFC star, bigger than what he is right now. So, I believe that Dricus Du Plessis possesses the ability to become one of the biggest stars in UFC history, and he possesses every single characteristic possible in order to make that plausible. Now, when I first was introduced to Dricus Du Plessis, that was his fight against Darren Till at UFC 282, which was a very interesting fight that Dricus Du Plessis ended up getting the finish in, but that was the first time that I was introduced with Dricus Du Plessis. He then fought Derek Brunson at UFC 285 on that John Jones Cyril Gane card on the prelims, and then he fought Mr. Robert the Reaper Whittaker at UFC 290 as a very active fighter, but Dricus Du Plessis hasn't been that active as of late. He's fought twice in 2024, which is kind of the normal amount for a champion, but considering that he skipped all of the later part of 2023 and fought once in January and now in August, he hasn't really been that active. So I think getting that activity up a little tiny bit would be one massive thing for Dricus Du Plessis to get into the sport and be just upgraded that much of a level for that level of stardom. Now, you don't have to be Alex Pereira level of active. Alex Pereira fights once every 3 months, and I know there was a report Bilal Muhammad turned down a fight with Shavkat Rakhmonov because he was on too short of a notice. Now, I actually broke that fight in a different video, so if you want to link that, but apparently that fight was scheduled for UFC 307, or was targeted for UFC 307 eventually, and was ended up turned down by Bilal, and then Mr. Pereira picked it up anyway. But like I'm trying to say is that Dricus Du Plessis, if he's a little bit more active, he could become a massive star in the UFC, saving cards, doing stuff like that. It is so appreciated by the organization to really where, you know, there is so many different individuals to where they can save cards and their stardom grows massively. You look at Alex Pereira saving his last 4 cards that he's been on: 295, 300, 303, and 307. Saving those cards entirely is the man Alex Pereira, and that's why he gets so much love around the UFC organization. But first off, if Dricus fights a little bit more, that's going to be such a big asset for him. And second off is just going to be time and embracing the culture of the South Africans, and that is something that is amazing. I have so many South African fans in my comments telling that Dricus is the GOAT, Dricus is this, and Dricus is that, and that is so amazing for Dricus Du Plessis because he is one of the biggest stars in the sport off of his fan base, and that is something that is going to keep growing and growing and growing with success. Yeah, yes, Dricus is going to have more and more haters as he keeps winning, but that's just natural. But Dricus is also going to have more and more and more fans as he keeps growing the sport, and that is going to be something that is going to only elevate himself in the UFC. Imagine if they get a fight in South Africa for Dricus Du Plessis. That might be the biggest fight in UFC history. Get let's say Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis 2 in South Africa would be an amazing fight to happen down there, or possibly a Robert Whittaker versus Dricus Du Plessis rematch, a Hamza Chimaev Dricus Du Plessis fight. Something like that in South Africa would be an incredible fight to be happen, and would ultimately level Dricus up another leg in the stardom. And like I said, lastly, Dricus Du Plessis just gotta keep winning. A lot of champions, the reason they grow in stardom is because they keep winning. The Israel Adesanya stardom, when he beat Robert Whittaker, and then when he beat Jared Cannonier, was only going up through that entire time. Winning all those consecutive fights in the UFC middleweight division only grew his stardom. Someone like Alexander Volkanovski, when he beat Max Holloway the first time, to when he beat Yair Rodriguez, that stardom was going up and up and up and up the entire time. I've known individuals who weren't big Volk fans at the start, but ever since he's kept winning, and ever since he's been a UFC legend inside that featherweight division, his stardom has only grown and grown and grown. So Dricus Du Plessis, if he's able to do that, it's going to be a massive asset for the UFC, because he's going to be able to just keep winning winning and winning and winning, and having a dominant champion like that is amazing for the UFC to be had. Ultimately, like I've said, Dricus Du Plessis possesses every single characteristic a UFC fighter rather, could have to become a massive star in the sport. You look at someone like Conor McGregor and everything of him outside of the UFC, and all of his mannerism and his characters promote him to be a bigger star no matter if he has the belt or not. John Jones, he doesn't need to fight with the belt to become a massive star. He's got that stardom outside of the UFC, and he's got that stardom from his past and his legacy within the organization. And I think Dricus Du Plessis, a fighter who I thought was a very interesting fighter. I didn't think he was that good coming up. His style was a little wonky. He had a bunch of different ways of winning fights, and he didn't have a good niche to be in that UFC organization. But ever since I've started watching him, I've just appreciated how good he is, and of how high of an IQ he has inside that UFC octagon, of how it translates to wins no matter if you think it's going to happen or it doesn't think it's going to happen. And that's ultimately why I picked him to beat Israel Adesanya at UFC 305, is Dricus Du Plessis finds ways to win, and that is ultimately what he does. And I think that's going to make something that only propels him as a star in the sport. And Dricus Du Plessis, like I said, has so many different years to come. But if he gets more active, if he fights 3 times a year, if Dricus Du Plessis embraces the South Africans as much as he's doing now and just waits in time, it's going to become bigger. And if Dricus Du Plessis just keeps winning, his stardom will blow through the roof in the UFC, and he will become the UFC's biggest asset in the organization currently. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please let me know what you think down below about this take of Dricus Du Plessis possibly becoming the UFC's biggest asset in the organization right now. Currently, I have a couple fighters who are a bigger asset to the organization. Let's say someone like Conor McGregor, John Jones, Alex Pereira, fighters like that who bring more views and more attention to the organization. But Dricus Du Plessis possesses every single characteristic in that UFC octagon to become one of the greatest stars the sport has ever seen. Absolute finishing Israel Adesanya. He's got that finishing ability. He finished Adesanya, Brunson, Till, Whitaker, a bunch of these different fighters. He went to a 5-round war with Sean Strickland, which was an amazing fight. So Dricus Du Plessis got the fans, he's got the stardom, he's got the personality, he's got the trash talk. And for Dricus' stardom to keep growing, he's ultimately just got to be himself, which is something that is very easy for him to do because he's a very confident individual. He's an individual who understands his surroundings inside the UFC and is comfortable being the UFC middleweight champion for many years to come. And I know he is very content with keeping that belt and only growing his brand and himself as a UFC fighter in the future. But thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. That would mean absolutely so much since we're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and hitting the subscribe button one person means so very much. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys very soon with more UFC content and news.